guys.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm also known as the Slow Coach. I recently ran my first ultra marathon. I ran 50 kilometers to celebrate my 50th birthday. It was my first ultra and I did it as an older runner. So a lot of the information I found when I was doing my research wasn't entirely applicable to me. I had to go anyway. I finished it and I loved it. But there are 10 lessons I learned from running my first 50K at 50 years old. And this is what I found out. If you know anything about me or the Slow Coach, you'll know that I am a little bit different from the average runner. I'm a fair bit older, I'm a little bit bigger, and I'm certainly a lot slower than most of the runners who are featured in the mainstream running media. But that's never changed my love of running. In fact, it's amplified it. I feel like the view from the back of the pack is glorious, and it's not one that gets enough attention. A 2-minute kilometer or a 10-minute kilometer, you still ran a kilometer. My 50K was in part a testament of what an ordinary body was capable of, and I ran it for a set of very personal reasons, which I'll get into a little bit more in a moment. My first tip, if you're approaching your first ultra, especially as an older runner, is that mindset matters. Know that the day is going to be hard. Have a goal and have a reason for why you're running. In my case, I had a goal of running 50Ks, obviously, but I had a why. I was running to mark a chapter in my life where I have a healthy body and that I can use it and that I can celebrate it. I was also running on behalf of people in my life who I love, who can't run right now, or people that have already passed away that I think about daily. So I have a big why, and that made a big difference. There's a point in every run, whether it's a 5K or a 50K, where things get hard, and you can just draw on that. It keeps me going. It's a much stronger reason than the glossy motivation that comes from, inspirational music and Instagram models. It's a lot deeper, it's a lot more profound, and in my case, it's a lot more powerful. Okay, then my next big tip is that training is critical. It goes without saying, you can't just wake up and decide to run 50Ks, especially if, like me, you're a bit older, a little bit heavier, haven't been an athlete your whole life. So I had a fairly good baseline of running. I think I've done about 15 or so half marathons, but I had actually only ever done one marathon, which took place in April 2021, and my ultra was set for August 2021. So there was a 4 or 5 month gap. I began my ultra training with a 21K long run and worked upwards from there at about an increase of about 10% per week. So my 21K run became a 23K run, which became 25, and so on. And over about 10 weeks, I worked up to a 35K long run. And then I gave myself a 3-week taper before race day. But alongside the training, I would say it was really critical to do strength and conditioning work. Now, I know that I was going to be on my feet for about 6.5 hours, and that's a lot of impact. I have older legs, I have slightly wider hips, and I really didn't want to expose myself to injury. So I made sure that at least twice a week I did a strength and conditioning workout. There's millions of them on YouTube, or you can have a look at the Run with the Slow Coach channel and you'll find a 30-minute follow along strength and conditioning workout there. Just make sure you incorporate that, especially if, like me, you're a little bit older, you're carrying an injury, or perhaps you're a little bit bigger. Strength and conditioning is your insurance policy against injury, and it just meant that the run was just that much more comfortable and that much more fun. My next tip is to do with gear. I actually didn't have a lot of gear. I don't feel like I'm actually much of an authority on gear. But like anybody, I would say that the most important piece of kit I had on the day was my shoes. I treated myself to a fitting with an expert shoe retailer a couple of weeks before my ultra, and I ran in a fairly new pair of shoes that just made me feel special, supported, and very, very comfortable. Apart from that, I didn't carry anything, but mostly because I had the luxury of running loops and coming back to my car whenever I needed anything. I know that on many point-to-point ultras that's not going to be an option and you'll need to carry a hydration pack. But from my experience, I can't really comment on that right now, except to say that I didn't need nearly as much as I thought I would. It was an awesome day, and the most important piece of kit that I carried was the support that I got on the day. It got me a long way. My fourth tip has to do with the route. Now, in my case, I wasn't running an official race. I am recording this during a hard lockdown in Sydney, so there are no races to choose from. Given that it was my 50th birthday and I wanted to run 50 kilometers, I had to choose my own route, which is often not a luxury that everybody has, but I decided I needed something flat, and ideally I needed some views, something pretty to look at on what I knew was going to be a fairly tough day. So I scoped my local neighborhood and I chose a circular-ish route up and down the streets of Wahroonga, including the beautiful views in Jubilee Oval. I know that not everybody can choose their route, but I mentioned that I chose mine because I knew that for my first ultra, having something flat would make it just that fraction easier for me. And the loops meant that I didn't have to carry a pack. So if you can, have a look at the route, choose something that is going to make it the most comfortable for you on what is otherwise going to be a pretty tough day. My fifth tip is one of the many mindset games I played with myself, which was to chunk up the day. Now, at the outset, 50 kilometers feels phenomenally long, especially if, like me, you've never been a runner, you still struggle to think of yourself as a runner. You feel a bit like a fraud standing at the start line and going, I'm going to run 50 kilometers. So I decided I would only think of it as 10 park runs. So it was broken down into smaller categories. I also was able to line up some friends to run sections of the race with me, which made it a lot easier. So having a change in routine every 5Ks, having a different running partner, having only a sort of finite set of road in front of me to think about, it all just made it a little bit easier to cope with, and it certainly made it a lot more fun. My sixth tip is to do with organizing some support. Now, I knew this was going to be a really tough day, and I just decided that I would turn it into something of a birthday party, given that under our current lockdown rules, we're not allowed to gather in groups, we're not allowed to have a party indoors, but we are allowed to exercise in groups of 2. So I put out the call for friends and running buddies to join me, and as I've already mentioned, I had a different friend on every 5K loop, which was just amazing. So it was like a series of relays. It was a different face on every loop. It was some new company, it was some fresh conversation. And it brought an element of fun, which really made a huge difference. I felt loved, I felt supported, I felt like I was being celebrated. In fact, I was blown away, maybe even a little bit overwhelmed by how much support I got. And it really, really filled my batteries. If you can organize some support for your ultra, I would highly recommend that you do that. A friendly face, somebody cheering for you, somebody you know who's got your back. It makes an enormous difference. nutrition. Now, like all aspects of my running, I rehearsed my nutrition as much as I rehearsed the running aspect of the day. I knew what would work and what wouldn't for my tummy, and I didn't deviate. So I'm sure you've heard it before, nothing new on race day. In my case, that meant a cup of coffee when I woke up. I tried to eat a banana, but I was nervous and struggled to get that down. I maybe ate half of it, if that. But as I've said, I had planned a series of loops around my car, which meant that every 5Ks or so, I did have the option of eating something. I'd say that I started eating at about the 10K mark. And to begin with, that consisted mostly of pieces of cut watermelon. But as the day wore on, I also ate some cold, boiled, salted potatoes, which are my absolute favorite. I did have a fairly good stash in my car of chewable goos and Cliff Bars, protein balls, even some potato chips. In the end, I actually didn't eat much of them, but it was good to know that they were there. My go-to is fresh fruit and potatoes, as I've mentioned, but I also drank a lot of water and a little bit of Powerade. It's important that you practice your nutrition as much as you practice your running, and make sure you only do what works for you. Don't be tempted by the new food on the trail refreshment tables. Try to avoid the lollies and the sugar. Nothing new on race day. Tip number 8 is to do with having a goal. Now, I know that goals don't work for everybody, but they really work for me. I find that if I'm training towards something, it keeps me focused and it keeps me going. So my goal was twofold. Obviously, in the first instance, I wanted to achieve the milestone of having run 50 kilometers, which in my life is a really big deal. It wasn't that long ago that I couldn't run to the street corner. I would be out of breath if I needed to run for the phone. So to give myself a set of memories where I knew that I had run 50 Ks was going to make me very proud of myself, which is something that money can't buy. So that was a big part of it. But the second part was that I had a little bit of a fundraising target attached to it too. I asked friends and work colleagues to support me in lieu of a birthday present, and I was able to raise a significant amount of money for a cause that meant a lot to me, and that was really motivating as well. So if goals work for you, set one and chase it down, because there is nothing like the feeling of achieving a goal. There's nothing like being proud of yourself. It's worth every minute. Tip number 9 is that luck plays a part on the day. I got really, really lucky. A week prior to my ultra, we had a lot of bushfires in the area and there was smoke in the air. A week after my ultra, there was very high wind conditions and trees were coming down. So to pick a day and then be blessed with the perfect weather conditions, it was cool, it was sunny, the air was calm. I got incredibly lucky, and I'm sure that contributed to the day. So you can't choose the weather conditions. I think if you're running on a trail or if you're running in cold or windy or wet conditions, it's going to be a really different experience. Luck plays a part, but when your luck comes in, ride it. Tip number 10 is to plan a bit of a reward. So I knew that 50 kilometers was going to mean a lot in my life. And it was, after all, my 50th birthday. So I planned an afternoon of rest and relaxation. I had a sneaky little nap. Truth be told, I actually fell asleep halfway through my egg and bacon roll. So it was just nice to have a reward to look forward to while the run was going on. I planned to have a takeaway dinner and a rather special gin and tonic, and a catch-up Zoom call with some girlfriends who wanted a bit of a debrief on the day. So those were all rewards or carrots that I knew that I could look forward to, and that gave me something to think about on the run, and it certainly made the recovery a little bit more enjoyable. So that's it. A few tips and hacks from my first 50-kilometer run, which I tackled at the age of 50. Those won't work for everybody. You may have a very different race that you're preparing for. You might have a very different body than mine. But I hope there's something in there. If you are a little bit older tackling your first ultra, please let me know. I'd love to hear about it. What worked for you? Are there any tips that I haven't covered that you think might be useful for someone? Please let me know. And if you'd like other information on running, if you are a bit older, if you're a beginner, if you're injured, or if you're a bit bigger, please follow the Slow Coach on social media and get in touch to let me know how I can help you. Happy running.